These are yours already. You already own them because Jesus has given them to you, and what Jesus gives, no one can take away. Amen. This is going to be a difficult sermon for some of you. When I visited the man, he was close to death. He had lived a long life of hard drinking, and it was taking his toll. His liver was shutting down, and he was going to die soon. And he had a lot of regrets. He was clean now, and he'd been clean for a couple of years. But he had not always been that way, and when he had been a heavy drinker, he had been very cruel to his wife. And his wife had died before he cleaned up. Now, this man knew Jesus, and he clung to Jesus. He knew how badly he had sinned. He knew. And when I visited him, he asked, "Will I get another chance?" He knew how bad he had been to his wife. He knew how evil he had been, and he longed for a chance to be with her again and treat her the way that she should have been treated. What should I have told him? The truth. Truth ain't always easy to share. Jesus gives us the answer. He gives us the truth in what we heard in our gospel today. And I really struggled with this. And one of the things I struggled with was actually fairly, not as difficult emotionally. Because there's a lot of stuff going on here. It's Tuesday of Holy Week. Jesus is going to die on Friday. The religious leaders are shooting with a lot of questions, trying to get him to mess up. And I could have talked about this group that was asking Jesus questions. They don't really believe that there's a resurrection, that once you die, and that's it. There ain't nothing else. I could have talked about this thing called the Levirate Law, that there was a rule back then that preserved family lines and protected women. And those things are important, but they're not the main point. So if you've got questions, if you want to know more about these things, I would encourage you, well, you can ask me, but I tackled those other things in our daily devotions that go up on YouTube and Facebook this last week. The link is in the email that got sent out yesterday if you're not following that already. So you can check out those things there. I'm not going to focus on them today. I'm going to focus on the main point. So this group of religious leaders came to Jesus and said, well, there's this woman, she got married, her husband died, she got married again, and he died, and then she got married again, and he died. And she went through 7 husbands, and then she died. So who's she married to in heaven? And they were asking this question, trying to trick Jesus. But I think it's actually a really good question. Who are you married to in heaven? Some of you have gone through life and you've been blessed to be married to and love more than one person. I think it's a fair question. Is it like Titanic? I know some of you love that movie. I know that for a fact. Came out in the 90s. And in the movie, spoilers for a movie that's 30 years old now, so if you're worried about that, stop listening until the end of this illustration. In the movie, Jack and Rose meet each other on the Titanic. They fall in love. The boat sinks. Jack dies, and Rose escapes. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I ruined it. Rose escapes. You find out in the course of the movie that after the Titanic sinks, Rose ended up marrying someone else, and they had a happy marriage several decades long. And then at the end of the movie, Rose dies of old age. And the very last scene of the movie, Rose comes to heaven, which apparently looks like the Titanic, and she and Jack are together forever. Feel bad for the guy that she ended up marrying, huh? But is that what heaven is? If you loved more than one person, are you stuck in heaven forever with the first person and the other person you loved? Too bad. Or is it that you're married to whoever you were married to when you died, and if you love someone else, well, now they get the short end of the stick? I mean, yeah, okay, the movie Titanic, believe it or not, that's not from the Bible. I know, it's hard to grasp that. But I think it is a fair question to ask. What's marriage going to be like in heaven? And Jesus gives the answer. The people of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of taking part in that age and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they can no longer die, for they're like the angels. They're God's children, since they are children of the resurrection. So, short answer, you're not married to anyone. And like I said, I think for some of us, that's really, really hard to hear. But for a moment, I need to set that aside. Because even before we get there, we need to take a look at just one word that Jesus said. Worthy. Jesus said that this is true for those who are considered worthy of being in heaven. In other words, who cares about marriage in heaven if you ain't getting there first? And Jesus says it's not about whether or not you consider yourself worthy. It's not whether or not you think you're good enough. Someone else has to consider you good enough. Someone else has to consider you worthy. And that person is God. And that makes sense, right? The owner of the house gets to say who is good enough to come into the house. Well, God owns heaven, so he's the one who gets to decide. What does it take to be considered worthy? The book of Revelation tells us. Actually, the whole Bible tells us, but I'm going to focus on one from the book of Revelation. Written by a guy named John, as God gives him a vision of what is coming. And God asks, who is worthy? And John weeps because there is no one worthy until he sees Jesus. Finally, there's someone good enough. See, Jesus was tempted in every way as you are, and yet he never failed. You ever been tempted? Yes, you have. You ever fail? You ever give in to that temptation? I have. That means I'm not good enough. But that is why Jesus came. See, Jesus didn't come to do everything right and then say, "Ha, I'm good enough. How about you losers?" That's not what he did. He came to be your substitute, to do all the things that you failed to do. And when he died, he took all of those sins away. We said it earlier in our service, you are forgiven. All those temptations you gave in to, they're washed away and you are clean. God looks at you now and says, good enough. Come on into heaven. I consider you worthy. So Jesus says, this is for you. You're worthy. And then Jesus says, and in heaven, you won't even be able to die. Think about how cool that is. So after church, after Bible study, I am planning to drive home. And it is a very dangerous trip for me. It's about a half mile away. I got to turn right out of the driveway. It's the next right, then a left, then a few houses down. Half a mile. I am expecting to get home safe. Statistically, I am likely to get home safe. I've driven home safe for as long as I've lived there. But I might not make it. I mean, really, have you driven on these roads? I could turn right, and someone coming the other direction could lose control of their car, hit me head on, and I could die instantly. I'm not in the best health. My doctor tells me. I could have a heart attack. Bam. I could be dead up here before the end of the service. Now, I don't think that's likely, but it's possible. I'm capable of dying. But Jesus says in the next life, I'm not going to be able to. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a place where you don't have to fear any danger, but there's still adventure around every corner? Can you imagine that? Isaiah says that in heaven we will run and not grow weary. C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia talks about how amazing it would be if you could run and never get tired. Can you imagine running and never getting short of breath? Your knees never ache. Your hips never go, ow. But you get to run. Wow. Revelation says that in heaven, Jesus himself will wipe every tear from your eye. No more sorrow, no more pain. It's gone forever. And I hear these promises and I ache for them. And then Jesus says, I won't be married. And I hear that today and I go, but wait a second. I like my marriage. I will be honest and say it would be very difficult for me if something happened to my wife. You tell me in heaven I won't be married? What? I don't know, if you either have been or are in a marriage that blesses you like that, you hear that, and if you're like me, you go, yeah, I don't know if I like that. Have you ever had something good that you enjoyed, and then you found something better? Growing up, I was a bit of a geek. I know that may surprise some of you. I really loved Star Wars growing up. But growing up, DVDs were not a thing yet. We had a VHS copy of Star Wars, and it was taped off of broadcast television, which means it was not great quality. We had one of those TVs that, it's that wide. Not the screen, that's behind the screen. One of those that's heavy and the colors were really washed out. You had to be on channel 3 to watch the VCR. You put the tape in and it goes, we taped it off TV, so there were commercials. You had to fast forward through the commercials, but I didn't care. I loved it. It was great. And then in 1997, Star Wars was re-released to movie theaters. And I finally got to see it the way it was intended to be seen. No commercial breaks in the middle. The movie theater never went in the middle of the thing. I got to see big screen, surround sound, with a couple hundred other fans that cheered and eating that perfect movie theater popcorn. I don't care if you don't like it, I love it. And suddenly, as good as Star Wars was on my little TV, I found something so much better. And while I was watching in the movie theater, I wasn't saying, I really wish this was just on my TV and I could see those commercials again. I wasn't missing what I used to have, as good as it was, because there was something so much better. And that's what heaven is going to be for us. You're not going to be sitting there in heaven. Jesus is going to greet you and wipe the tears off your eye. You're going to know joy in a way that you've never even been able to imagine it. And you're not going to go, you know what would make this better? I wish that I could still be married. You're not even going to think about it because it's going to be that good. You're never going to be lonely because Jesus is with you and you are with all the saints in heaven. You're going to be celebrating. And I get that, again, if you're in a good marriage, that is hard to fathom. But Jesus says it. And Jesus don't lie. So even if I don't understand it, I can say, Jesus, this is good. Amen. So what should I have said to that man? I honestly don't remember. That's probably a good thing. But what I should have said was, you'll see your wife in heaven. She's there right now celebrating. And when she sees you, she'll welcome you with open arms. She's not going to be mad at you because you're forgiven. Those sins are washed away. You've been counted worthy of heaven. but she's not going to be your wife anymore. And you're not going to mind because it's that good. And you'll get to sing in glory forever. And that's what awaits you. Whether you're married, whether you're single, whether you're widowed or divorced. You're not going to look back on your relationships today and go, oh man, I wish I had that. You're going to celebrate because you'll be with Jesus, the God who loves you enough to say, good enough. You're worthy. Welcome home. Amen. Let's stand. And now the peace of God